Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. Today I'm going to be discussing what I read for week 4 of Rocket Summer, an exciting reading event created by Michael K. Vaughan, in which we are reading classic science fiction for the month of July. That is science fiction from the 19th century through 1969. This last week of July is devoted to the 1960s. Michael has been ably assisted in this event by a number of co-hosts whose names I'll list in the notes below. And I have been thrilled to be a co-host as well. The first book that I read from the 1960s is Algis Budrys' novel Rogue Moon from 1960. This novel came to me highly recommended. It's a strange novel. Ultimately, I liked it very much, but it took me a little bit of time to get into it, for the story to get started. It took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on. It's a novel about the discovery of a large alien artifact found on the surface of the moon. The artifact kills explorers who come to investigate it. The main character, Dr. Edward Hawks, is heading up a top secret project for the U.S. Navy in which they are investigating this artifact. Hawks has created a matter transmitter which scans a human being and makes an exact copy of that person. It's the copies that go on to explore the structure on the moon, while the original human subjects remain on Earth in a state of sensory deprivation, which allows them basically to experience whatever the copy explorer is experiencing on the moon. The explorers on the moon are all killed. Most of the originals back on Earth lose their sanity as a result. And this is because of what their doppelgangers on the moon have experienced, various forms of death. That is until Hawks recruits Al Barker, a thrill seeker who becomes a part of the project. Barker becomes increasingly determined not to let this alien artifact get the best of him, even if it means dying over and over again. Each death is the result of violating some unspoken or unknown rule in force within the alien artifact. But each death also reveals something more about how to move through this structure. Each explorer gets a little bit further along in the structure and learns a little bit more about how to master it. Barker becomes obsessed with returning and ultimately conquering the alien artifact. The last section of the novel, where Barker and Hawks both face the structure of the alien artifact together, is really exciting and suspenseful, and it makes the whole book worthwhile. There are a number of chapters before this, though, where very little action occurs, and there's a lot of talk among characters. There are a few female characters. Barker has a girlfriend named Claire who spends a lot of her time coming on to other men in the novel. She's described as something of a sociopath. Hawks begins to fall in love with another woman, Elizabeth, and she can't understand why he hasn't tried to sleep with her yet. Here's a dialogue that takes place between Claire and Hawks, in which Hawks reveals that he just doesn't understand women. Hawks was puzzled. "I'm glad you feel that way," he said slowly, "but I don't think that's true. Look." He got up and began pacing back and forth while Elizabeth sat watching, a faint smile on her face. "Women," he said earnestly, "women have always fascinated me. As a kid, I did the usual amount of experimenting. It didn't take me long to find out life wasn't like what happened in those mimeographed stories we had circulating around the high school. No, there was something else. What? I don't know. But there was something about women. I don't mean the physical thing. I mean some special thing about women. Some purpose that I couldn't grasp. What bothered me was that here were these other intelligent organisms in the same world with men, and there had to be a purpose for that intelligence. If all women were for was the continuance of the race, what did they need intelligence for? A simple set of instincts would have done just as well, and as matter of fact, the instincts are there. So what was the intelligence for? There were plenty of men to take care of making the physical environment comfortable. That wasn't what women were for. At least it wasn't what they had to have intelligence for. But I never found out. I've always wondered. It's kind of hard not to laugh out loud with dialogue like that, but the final action sequences of the novel redeem it and make for some really suspenseful and exciting reading. I also read the first ever Star Trek novel, which was written by science fiction writer James Blish. This is the first in a 12-volume series written over a 10-year period, based on the episodes from the original Star Trek TV series. This show started in the fall of 1966. This first volume was published in 1967. I have 2 copies of it. One was the 19th printing, and this one, the same cover but smaller artwork. This one was the 26th printing of this first volume ever of Star Trek by James Blish. This is not exactly what I would call a novelization. It's a collection of 7 short stories based on 7 episodes in the first season of the original show that aired 1966-1967. They're more like what I would call adaptations. Blish wrote these stories from early drafts that he was given of the episodes. And so often the stories that he wrote do not actually reflect what ultimately was filmed in the TV show. In several cases, the titles of Blish's stories are actually different and don't match the titles of the episodes. I actually watched Star Trek, the original series, the first season, when it was a new show in 1966 when I was a child. I've seen these episodes many times over the years. I think, though, that if you didn't know these episodes already, these stories would be very confusing. and difficult to understand. In many places, a lot of the action is simply summarized. Dialogue is omitted. They're just not particularly good short stories. These are not like the later novelizations that were made of the early movies, which are really fully developed novels. These are more like prose sketches of early episodes. They are interesting, though, historically, especially if you are interested in the history of Star Trek. But they're not particularly good science fiction short stories. One interesting thing, though, about this first volume is that the book was dedicated to Harlan Ellison. To Harlan Ellison, who was right all the time. Star Trek Volume 1 by James Blish. Finally, my best read of the 1960s was Ursula K. Le Guin's 1966 novel, Rocannon's World. This is the first novel that she published in her writing career. It's also the first novel in what would come to be known as the Hainish cycle of novels and stories. It was originally published in 1966 as an ace paperback. I have it in a couple of different forms. I have this SF Masterworks edition, which has the first 3 volumes of the Hainish cycle in it. Rocannon's World, Planet of Exile, and City of Illusions. And I also have this beautiful Library of America 2-volume series of the Hainish novels and stories. And Rocannon's World is of course, in volume 1. This is just a really, really beautiful box set, 2-volume edition of all of the Hainish novels and stories. The novel actually starts with a short story, Semley's Necklace, which appeared as a stand-alone story entitled The Dowry of Angyar, which appeared in Amazing Stories in 1964. The story depicts the space voyage of a young woman, Semley, who travels from her then unnamed planet to a museum to reclaim a necklace, which is a valuable family heirloom because she and her family are living in extreme poverty. And this family heirloom had been stolen from the family generations before. It's on this journey that she meets the scientist Gavril Rocannon. When she travels back home again, she has not aged at all, but 16 years have elapsed on her planet, and her family has changed very drastically. In Rocannon's world, Rocannon returns to Semley's world, now known as Fomalhaut II, where he discovers that there is an enemy base on the planet, an enemy to the League of All Worlds. This enemy destroys Rocannon's ship and his crew, and so he is left stranded on this foreign planet. he becomes determined to find this enemy base and infiltrate it. He's helped by the natives of the planet, which include several different races, some of which appear to be human or humanoid, and others seem more like dwarves and elves from some other fantasy works that we all probably know. Without his spaceship, Rocannon must travel by flying wind steed, sort of a large flying cat or tiger. They embark on a long and perilous journey across the planet to find the enemy base. This is only the beginning of a very large collection of works by LeGuin, including some of her most famous books, such as The Dispossessed and The Left Hand of Darkness. While one book does not necessarily lead into the next, and apparently they do not need to be read in sequence, I felt, as a relatively new reader in this genre, that I wanted to start at the beginning with her first novel. And next, I'm on to Planet of Exile. While I thought the novel was a little bit slow in the very beginning, and it did take me a while to get my bearings, I soon entered wholeheartedly into this world that reminded me at times of Tolkien, and also a little bit of H.G. Wells in The Time Machine. Clearly, this is clearly an early work of LeGuin's. Some critics say, it's derivative, or, she was clearly imitating others. I didn't see it that way, but there certainly are echoes of other works in it. It's her first ever novel, as I said, and I'm looking forward to seeing where she's going to take us in the rest of the series. It was definitely the best of the books that I read this week, representing the 1960s. So I'm a little sad that Rocket Summer is coming to a close. I still have a lot more to read, and I feel like I'm only getting started in this incredible genre of science fiction. But it has been a great start indeed. And there is no reason that I can't extend Rocket Summer into August or even September. But this will conclude my weekly reports on what I've been reading for each of the Rocket Summer prompts. I've said in many other videos that discovering Michael K. Vaughan's channel a few years ago, when I was kind of struggling myself to find myself in the early days of retirement, my early days of defining myself as something other than a high school English teacher, finding Michael's channel was a life-saving moment that opened up, quite literally, new worlds for me. I began reading Michael's science fiction starter kit to get my bearings and to fill in some of the huge gaps in my reading. And I discovered a new genre that I loved and that I had neglected for most of my life. I found so many new to me authors, and I have been having the time of my life. So again, I thank you, Michael K. Vaughan, for your wonderful channel and for taking a chance on this newbie and inviting me to be a co-host to this absolutely delightful event. As always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.